Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Rent Prep for Landlords. I'm Andrew Schultz, Community Manager here at Rent Prep. I'm also a licensed real estate broker in the state of New York with over 14 years of experience in the property management and rental property industries. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at fake pay stubs. We're going to go through some fake pay stubs, show you some on screen. We're going to show you some of the red flags we found on these pay stubs that indicated to us that they may be fake. We're also going to show you just how easy it is to generate a fake pay stub. And we're going to wrap the show up today by showing you how you can go about preventing fake pay stubs from getting into your apartments. We'll get to all that right after this. So to start things off, we're going to go ahead and take a look at 3 or 4 different examples of pay stubs that we feel have been altered or have some sort of information falsified on them. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our first one here. And this is one that was sent to our office a while back. And you can tell that this one is a pretty egregious example of a pay stub that's been altered. It's what is very, very straightforward. It doesn't take a lot to understand that this text here, all of the text in this middle block here has been altered. You can tell that obviously the text is not as crisp in the background, which tells me that they probably took a picture of this pay stub and then made edits to the photo. And also the text doesn't really line up with the curvature of the paper. So you can see there's a line down the center of the paper here, a fold down the center of the paper, and none of the text lines up with that fold. The text doesn't curve on this page the way that the paper actually curves on in physicality. So you can tell basically just from that this is obviously a fake pay stub, not even a good fake pay stub. It was a pretty bad alteration. This is also interesting because they used the pay period of 1/31 to 2/4, and they said that their pay period date was 2/4 as well. I'm assuming that they mean the payment date was 2/4, which is pretty atypical. We'll get into more of that on another one. But this is just a really, really bad example of a fake pay stub. The quality of this one is very, very poor. This one was easy to spot. We're going to take a look at a couple more here, though, that are significantly more difficult to find that sort of a connection on, to find those red flags on. Now, let's move on to our second stub here. Sometimes you're going to get a stub that looks super convincing, except for maybe a detail or two. And this stub is actually a pretty good example of that. As we look over this stub, it's pretty obvious that this one was generated from a website. This is not something that was just edited using a phone or something along those lines. And we're going to show you how that process works here in just a couple of minutes. But this stub would likely get past a lot of landlords here in, actually, I guess I shouldn't even just put a location to it. This stub would probably get past a lot of landlords. The main reason that this stub did not make it past our office is because the tenant applicant screwed up when they were applying, and they only used a first name. There's only a first name under this black box. There's no last name anywhere on this pay stub. If they hadn't screwed that one thing up, there's a good chance that this one probably would have found its way through our screening process. The other thing that we noticed on this one that led us to believe that it was fake was, again, the pay period ended on 2/17/2022, and the pay date was also 2/17/2022. That's pretty atypical. The reason I say that is because more often than not, people are not paid the same day of the same day of the week that the pay period closes. Generally, they're being paid for last week's work in the current week. So for instance, here at our company, we run our payroll on Wednesday for the previous week, and everybody gets their paychecks on Friday. So to see somebody that has a pay period and a pay date that are on the same date is pretty atypical. It's not impossible. There are situations where somebody might have a pay stub that would indicate that they received their their paycheck on the same date that the period ended. But more often than not, that's in a termination situation where somebody is being escorted out the door on their way out of the company when they're being terminated, essentially. There was one other thing that I noticed on this application, on this pay stub that I thought was weird, and that's that the other benefits and information box is completely empty. Typically, this box is going to have information about sick leave or vacation pay or something along those lines. Typically, it's not just empty. It can be empty, so this is not necessarily the biggest red flag out there. But when you start seeing things, more than one thing, they start to add up and create the overwhelming impression that what you're dealing with is a fake pay stub. In this instance, obviously, it was pretty straightforward. We didn't have a last name on this pay stub, so we knew right away that this had been altered in some fashion. But there are some of those other red flags out there that you should key into and look for when you're looking at these pay stub documents. Now we're looking at our third and fourth pay stubs here, and these ones were actually pretty convincing. It wasn't until I spent some time really looking at these pay stubs that I actually found a couple of red flags. And if it wasn't for these inconsistencies, again, this is one that might have found its way past the screening process. So these pay stubs are getting better and better as time goes on, and it's going to get harder and harder to find people that are making these fake pay stubs. It's going to get harder and harder to find the red flags. So we're going to start things off. This is actually two pay stubs from the same applicant, just spaced one pay period apart. And the first thing that I want to mention is up here we have this was a company logo, this upper left-hand corner box, and then right next to it was the company's name, and I think it was just the name there because their address was down here. The thing that was a red flag on that for me was the fact that the logo and the text did not line up at all. There was pretty obviously something going on there where things didn't line up, and then the fonts were not lining up as well. So when we looked at the font of the logo, or I'm sorry, when we looked at the font of the company name versus the font of the address underneath, we could tell that there were some inconsistencies there as well. The next thing that I noticed on this stub was this pay to the order of line, and it's a little bit difficult here. I don't think I can draw a line on screen without jumping in too deep here, but if you pay attention, you'll see that the bottom of this J does not line up with the bottom of this pay to the order of line. Again, it's a formatting error that, to me at least, could indicate that there's some sort of a red flag here, that this might be a pay stub that is altered. The other thing that I noticed in that pay to the order of line is that the pay to the order of and their full address was all on one line. That could be hit or miss. I didn't really make too big of a deal out of that. But moving down a little bit into the company information box, you can see, again, the text doesn't line up here. There's a little bit of a gap between where the C starts and where the D starts. And then these two fonts don't really match either. It's kind of hard to see when I'm zoomed in here, but there was a font mismatch between the company information text and then the text that was actually here for the company's information. Moving down a little bit more, and I think I'm going to leave these side by side like this because then you guys can see what I'm talking about on both screens. Moving down into the employee information box, we could tell that this text here was altered because the font for the applicant's name and address was actually larger than the font you can see over here for the everything else that's in that box. So for instance, the Social Security here is smaller than the tail end of this address here. And the other thing that I noticed is that there's less of a space between the top of this text here and the bottom of this text for the Social Security number. It just indicates to me that there's some sort of an alteration that has been made to this pay stub. So backing up a little bit here, that pretty much covers the maybe red flags. The one thing that I really noticed that was kind of the straw for me that indicated to me that this is probably going to be a fake pay stub. I'm going to go ahead and turn my webcam window off here for just a second. And you can see the check numbers down here at the bottom. So these are the checks that were supposedly issued to this individual. And you can see that the early statement, this is the earnings statement from July 29th, indicates a check number of $41.50. And this later statement from August 11th indicates a check number of, am I looking at the same pay stub? I am, excuse me. Go back here. The early July statement, July 29th, indicates a check number of $85.39, and this second later stub indicates a check number of $41.50. Again, this is not necessarily a red flag in and of itself. We'll go ahead and pop back up on the screen here. This is not necessarily a red flag in and of itself. Payroll could have been drawn from two different accounts, one on one week, one on a different week. There's a lot of things that could be logical explanations for this, but more often than not, payroll checks increase in number, not decrease in number. So to go from an 8,000 check number to a 4,000 check number, only 1 week apart on these pay periods, is another indicator to me that we may be dealing with some sort of a falsified pay stub document here. Now, one thing that I have not talked about on any of these pay stubs is the math itself. The math on all of the pay stubs that I showed you today does work out on all of the pay stubs. So if you were to start with the gross income number and account for all of the deductions, the math on all of those pay stubs does factor out and everything actually checks and balances, which is kind of surprising. As far as the actual amounts of the deductions or how much should be set aside for taxes, we didn't really jump into all that. But another red flag that you will sometimes catch is a pretty obvious math error. So a lot of times, if we're doing a manual review on a pay stub, we will actually take the time to take the gross pay, subtract out all the deductions, and actually take a look to see if that math does work. There was nothing inconsistent in the math aspect of any of those pay stubs that we looked at today. And with today's technology, the ability to create a fake pay stub that looks very, very legitimate, including the math, is getting easier and easier and easier. So how are applicants actually getting their hands on these fake pay stubs in the first place? Honestly, it's not as difficult as you might think. We're going to jump back over to desktop mode here, and this is a screenshot that was shared inside the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. I want to go ahead and thank Pam in that group for sharing this with us. And this is literally a screenshot of someone's profile on Facebook, and their entire job is generating fake pay stubs. They literally are online and advertising on Facebook as someone who can sell you a fake pay stub or sell you a fake bank statement, whatever it is that you need to try to get through whatever verification process it is that you're trying to falsify your way through. And it's not exclusive to just the real estate market. I've seen this thing happen in the auto world. One of my friends owns a smaller auto dealership, and they're starting to see fake pay stubs, and it is starting to happen in other places as well. So this is not unique just to real estate, but it is becoming a bigger problem because the technology is getting better and because it's so much easier now than it used to be able to fake one of these pay stubs. So how do you actually go about faking a pay stub? We're going to generate a fake pay stub right here in this video. And the first thing I did was went over to Google and just typed fake pay stub generator. You can see that there are a ton of different websites that offer this service, if that's what you want to call it. But we're going to go ahead and just click this top one here, and it's thepaystubs.com. Looks like a very, very nice website. Apparently, the scammers are interested in making their websites look nice now. Let's see if they can actually make a pay stub that would pass the check. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to type in Own Buffalo Inc. We'll use our company's information as the company. 1125 Harlem Road in Buffalo. Automatically filled in our city, state, and zip code. We can choose our company logo. Let's go ahead and throw that on there. That's pretty exciting. And it also gives you the option to add more information onto the pay stub if that's something that you want to do. So let's go ahead and throw our company's phone number on there just for fun. Now we need to actually mention or fill in the information as to who our employee is. And by the way, this is updating over here on the right side of the screen as I am going through and typing in the information. You can see that it's already dropped our company logo and address information there. We're going to go ahead and generate a fake pay stub for me. We're going to say that the last 4 digits of my social security number is 1234. And obviously there are some boxes here that we can fill in for dependents, for other income, for deduction amounts, things of that nature. Let's go ahead and put in a fake address here. We're going to say 123 Rent Prep Way. We're going to say that that's in Lancaster, New York, 14043, I think is the zip code of Lancaster. Not that it really matters for this particular exercise. You can also add in additional information about the employees, such as filing statuses, state tax allowances. If they're in New York City, there's some allowances for down there as well. And then let's get into the salary information here. Now you can either set yourself up as an hourly employee or a salary employee. Let's go ahead and leave me in as an hourly employee. Now let's make me salary. Why not? How often is this employee paid? We're going to say that I get a salary of $20,000 every 2 weeks, which, if I remember correctly, I think that comes out to a cool $1 million a year. I'm pretty sure I can live on $1 million a year, so that sounds like an appropriate salary. You can add an employee hire date. Let's go ahead and say that I was hired at the beginning of this year. You can also specify pay dates. So you can actually come in here and say, all right, I need my first pay stub to show that I was earning pay. And let's see here. My paycheck came in on July 7th. And the starting check number will be 7246. You can actually add some additions or deductions on there if you need to. And then using our first pay date of 7/7, we're going to go ahead and say that our second pay date, well, it won't let me select my second pay date. I think it may actually do that for me automatically. But essentially what you can see here is that it is generating these pay stubs. And and it allows you to change the check numbers. And if you notice, these check numbers are just randomly generated. So that might have actually been where the pay stub that we were looking at earlier came from, the one that had the incorrect pay stub information or the incorrect check numbers on it. But you can scroll down here. You can add direct deposit information, email information, and ultimately the goal is for you to buy the 3 pay stub package, which is a total of $26.97. So for $27, an applicant can get a series of 3 pay stubs in order, in date order, in sequential date order. And as long as they fill in the information correctly here, if they made their check numbers 1, 2, and 3 versus whatever was randomly generated in there so that things were sequential, you don't want them to be exactly sequential, obviously, but they shouldn't be, your first check shouldn't be higher than your second check in terms of check numbers, obviously. And then we could take a look at the pay stub that it generated here. And this is actually a pretty legitimate looking earnings statement. The crazy thing that I found as I was looking through is right underneath the preview stub, if that's not the format that you want, if you know what the format is that the company is that you're trying to fake, you can actually come in here and select a ton of different pay stub formats. So we just selected an ADP format, which I'm sure a lot of people are pretty familiar with. We'll go ahead and click preview the stub. And you can see this is a pretty legitimate looking pay stub. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and grab let's see if I can grab that other image real quick from that. I think that this is a direct copy of that pay stub that we were looking at previously. Guess not. I guess it's not a direct copy, but it's pretty close. I bet you that this person used this exact same website to generate their fake pay stub. They could have been just using a different template or whatever the case may be. So as you can see, there are a bunch of different options in here for different pay stubs and earning statements that you can use. But ultimately, that's where this documentation is coming from. That's where people are finding this information, is on websites like thepaystubs.com, where they can literally go online and buy a set of fake documentation for under $30. And then they're going to pass that documentation on to you, and you're going to have to try to screen around it to make sure that you're not approving an application that's based on falsified income documentation. So how do you actually go about preventing this from happening? Well, the fact of the matter is that you can't necessarily stop it from happening, but you can do some things to help you better catch it from becoming an issue for you and your portfolio and your assets. I wanted to take a minute to talk about RentPrep's income verification service, which is an add-on service that can be added to any of the tenant screening products that RentPrep is currently offering. The nice thing about this service is that it basically allows you to truly verify what someone's actual income information is, because this is a direct connection to the applicant's bank account, where it downloads their deposit information and provides it to you in a format that allows you to see what their true income is. The report that I have up on screen right now is a sample report of what you would get if you were to use the income verification product over at RentPrep. And the nice thing about this product is that it provides a ton of information. Now, depending on the bank that the applicant is using, you may get up to 12 months of information from their bank, and that'll pull down all of their deposits. It's not looking at their expenses. It's not looking at where they're spending their money. It's only pulling down the raw data on the actual deposits, and it's going to break it down into recurring income, non-recurring income, and total income. And you can see here that it breaks it down over a couple of different averages so that you can see what someone is looking at, how someone's income is looking over the course of time. You can also come down to this next section, which talks about account balance summaries, which is going to give you their current balance, their available balance, what their average balance is, which can sometimes be incredibly useful, and then what type of account it is. So you can tell if somebody's sitting on a bunch of money in a savings account or something along those lines. And then as you scroll down here, it also tells you more information about the income sources. It starts with the recurring, and here you can see that there's a payroll that gets deposited. It was deposited in April of 2021, and it ended in January of 2022. And then you can also see non-recurring income. This would be irregular income, maybe a check from a family member for a gift, or something like a tax refund would fall into a non-recurring income, something along those lines. Essentially, it's anything that they're not getting on a regular basis, like a payroll check would be. So the irregular income, the non-recurring revenue that comes through the door, you can see the total by source. and you can see when that came through. And if there has been a time where you've seen the same place make more than one deposit, you can actually see it here on that non-recurring revenue list as well. Down at the bottom, it does take the recurring revenue and it actually breaks out all of the deposits that was able to download as well as the date of those deposits. That actually is pretty handy because it gives you an indication as to whether or not someone's pay is consistent, at least their net pay is consistent, and how often that person is actually getting paid. So it's pretty useful to have that information as well. And then last but not least, down at the bottom of this document, you do have the non-recurring income source breakdown, which is going to tell you every single deposit that was not a payroll deposit or not something that was happening on a regular basis, what that amount was, and how often it was happening. So this is an incredibly useful report that you can add on to any of the RentPrep tenant screening services, any of the credit and background checks that you're already running at RentPrep. This is something that can be added on to that product. And essentially the way that this works is once you've gone ahead and chosen this product, you're going to get, or rather your applicant is going to get, an email that has them log into a secure portal. And from there, they actually log into their bank account using their bank account online banking credentials. And at that point, the website goes ahead and downloads the deposit data so that you can see it. The tenant never has a chance to alter the report that I just showed you. They do have a chance, I believe, to add some more information if they want to explain something, but the actual data that gets downloaded is not altered by the tenant in any fashion, or not altered by the applicant in any fashion. That report gets emailed to you directly. This is probably the easiest way to do a true income verification for someone, to the point where you understand not only what their income is, but also if they have any non-recurring sources of revenue, if they have any random income that comes in, things that may be reported or not reported outside of their job. All of that gets placed on one report, and it makes it very easy for you to actually tell what someone's true income is and not what they're telling you just based off of a pay stub that may or may not have been altered. So there you have it. Fake pay stubs are really starting to become an issue for landlords and property managers, as well as other areas in other industries as well. We mentioned autos, for instance. That's starting to become a bigger issue. And this is a problem that I think is only going to get worse as time goes on, as more people learn about this process, and as more people understand just how easy it is to actually go through and generate some fake income documents. If you come across any fake income documents while screening your tenants, go ahead and drop us a comment down below. Thank you for watching this video. I'm Andrew Schultz with rentprep.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be back in a couple weeks with an all-new episode that you won't want to miss. But until then, I'll talk to you soon.